welcome to Loaves to Legends, your new favourite history podcast brought to you by the Sandwich Guildhall Museum. I am your host, Gia, and I'm here with the rest of our lovely Loaves to Legends team to entertain, educate and indulge you in all things big and small related to our gorgeous town of Sandwich. Shortly I'll be joined by a second host of today, Kat, to give you today's episode. But before we get into that, I want to encourage all you wonderful people to not just listen, but to get involved too. One of the things we want to emphasize on Loaves to Legends is that this podcast is yours as much as it is ours. We have a wonderful online community and you can chat to other history-loving fans on our Discord, or you can email us any facts or feedbacks at loaveslegends@gmail.com. The link to both the Discord and the email are in the episode description. Well, hello, Kat.
Hello, Gia.
Welcome back. For the listeners, this is Kat's second time being on Loaves to Legends. Kat was our co-host in our very first episode on Rodney the Rat. She is now back to give us this criminally fascinating episode and will be leading this episode herself. How's it to be back on here?
It's fantastic to be back on here. Thanks very much for inviting me back.
Correct answer. Glad you said that.
No, frankly, I'd rather be at home.
Oh, no. Ignore that. We'll edit that out, listeners, sure. Right, I'm excited for this episode. So Kat has researched and she is running this episode herself. I am listening and learning like you guys. So thank you so much for doing all the hard work on this one.
You're very welcome. It was very, very enjoyable to do the research on this one in particular.
Oh, I love that. Brilliant. Okay, so let's get into it. Kat, what are we learning about today?
Right, so the setting is our courtroom in Sandwich Guildhall Museum and the year is 1934. So to set the scene a bit more for you, the courtroom, which was built in 1579, has been very well preserved and you should definitely come and visit.
Absolutely, I agree.
Absolutely. Now, the exact dates for the crime are the end of March 1934. The investigation began at the start of April 1934. The first trial lasted from the 4th to the 13th of April 1934. And the two men, called Thomas Webb and John Olsen, are charged with intent to commit felonies.
Intent to commit felonies? Ooh.
Intent to commit felonies. The wording is very important here.
Oh, I'm hooked already. So my first impressions got me thinking, what do you mean intent? What is their intent? And what honestly is so fascinating about a trial to do with two people's intent to commit a crime? Well, I assume something must have gone wrong. When you think of someone being convicted of a crime, it's fair to say that you would assume something was stolen, someone was hurt, or something was damaged. Mm-hmm. But of course, technically none of that actually has to happen. The intent to commit a crime is still a crime. The planning and starting and carrying out the plan, well, it's bad enough whether they're successful or not. Oh, but I do love a crime story. I absolutely love a true crime story. And getting to share one that took part in our very own courtroom is extra exciting. Tell us, Kat, what happened?
Well, get comfortable, Gia, and everyone listening, because here's the story of two cat burglars who failed to actually steal anything. Highlights of the actual crime include Webb climbing over rooftops like a cat burglar, getting in through a window to the building and then not taking anything. And the second highlight is both men's failure to blow up a safe after 2 attempts.
Okay. Cat burglar climbing on the ceiling, yep. Failure to blow up a safe.
Proper Spider-Man climbing and then didn't take anything.
Oh, what you kind of, the idea that you've seen in the old movies, I guess, a proper burglar movie.
Yeah.
But didn't take anything.
And didn't take anything.
Wow, that's a lot of effort, I want to say. Cat burglar. And blowing up, how many times was the safe?
2.
2 times. That's quite comical, actually. All the effort and completely failing.
Absolutely complete failure. Really bizarrely, the first trial ends with Olsen admitting to 3 other charges he wasn't on trial for at the time. The charges themselves are also amazing, we'll come back to that, and which the police had no prior knowledge of. Later on, Webb does the same. So the exact quote from the newspaper is, he wished 3 other offences taken into account. And the crimes were breaking into a house and stealing cigarettes, broke the gas meter in a house, so broke into a house, broke the gas meter, left, and, quote, did the chocolate machine in, quote from Olsen's statement on the trial, on the first trial on the 4th of April 1934. So I keep mentioning that this was the first trial. There was later a second trial that happened purely with the evidence voluntarily confessed in the first trial. The police had no prior knowledge of the crimes apart from this.
This is so weird. So Olsen, he's not only is he confessing voluntarily and willingly to these crimes, he's also the crimes themselves. He broke into a house and just broke the gas meter.
He did.
And then, did a chocolate machine in? What does that even mean?
Don't actually know.
You don't know.
I couldn't actually find any more about this. I was looking through all the newspaper documents. I can't find any more than that quote, which is a real shame because I'd love to know.
I'd love to know that too. Oh my god! I'm just picturing him at like almost like a confectionery vending machine and just slamming it, and that's what I'm pitching, and breaking it.
Yeah, just shaking it. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, so this feels like a comedy sketch, I gotta admit.
It absolutely does. It feels like a Laurel and Hardy sketch or something.
Absolutely. This feels like this can't be real. Oh, yeah. I love this. Why would you, as a criminal, confess to a crime that no one's even accused you of?
Well, I have a couple of theories here. Perhaps to prove they weren't totally incompetent criminals. Think about it. Olsen has just been caught and now been put on trial. Therefore, it's become known to the public that not only is he a thief, but a bad one at that. He can't even burgle properly. Maybe he wanted to show off that he was a proper criminal. Or, my second, probably more likely theory, maybe he was trying to get into jail. Confessing to further crimes whilst on trial would ensure he served time inside.
Trying to get into jail? Why would Olsen or Webb want to be locked up?
Right, so it's very important to remember the context of the time period. So the first thing to be aware of is the Great Depression. So, massive economic poverty. Possibly people were actually poor enough because, in jail, at least you'd get somewhere to sleep and somewhere to get fed. It's also important to know that jail reforms had taken place very recently. So removing hard labour and solitary confinement. I mean, it was still fairly grim, but at least you got food and somewhere to sleep. So it's possible they did actually feel desperate enough to want to get in.
Good point. It's the 1930s. So yeah, Great Depression is the conditions of people living in the street, especially though if you're someone who would go to low level crime and your living conditions aren't good.
Exactly.
So yeah, prison reforms, being prison, maybe it's just a nicer life than it is to be in the streets.
Absolutely. And again, to be clear, prison was fairly grim. It's just that for some people, life outside was worse.
Oh wow, okay. That makes sense now. I like your theory here that they want to get into prison. It makes more sense in my head of why Olsen would confess to these further crimes. Absolutely.
There is actually another explanation here that occurred to me more recently. The judge ended up being quite a lot more lenient with them than he might otherwise been, and he kind of rewarded them for the fact that they voluntarily confessed.
Right.
So it might be, the other reason might be that it doesn't come back to haunt them later.
He knows that he'll probably get found out for those crimes.
Exactly. If he goes to jail, if he gets found out for crimes having already been convicted as a criminal, the sentence would probably be harsher.
Ah, that's a good point. And I suppose when you're in the trial, you're in the courtroom, the kind of reality of what you've done sinks into
it hits you.
So maybe at the moment he's like, oh, I have to confess now. This is going to get worse if not.
Yeah, it'll just get worse and escalate.
Very good thinking. Thank you.
So let's dive in a bit more into who these characters are. This might help us to understand why they tried but failed to commit this crime and why they suddenly admitted to crimes the police weren't aware they had even committed. It's interesting. It does seem to be a bit of a different story for both of them. Webb seems to have been a career criminal born and raised locally in Sandwich. There is possibly a newspaper bias here because, the newspapers, it's kind of very much of the time as well. The newspapers would be very, harsh and judgmental. So we've maybe got to factor that here, but it does seem like quite a lot of opportunities were given to him throughout his life to get into other careers. People financed his education, someone tried to finance him being a sculptor, but he really does seem to have voluntarily just chosen he wanted to be a career criminal. Just went, no, I want to do crime.
It had people finance him to have careers in other way, and he's like, no. Maybe it wasn't in his plan. I'm going to rob and fail to robbed this house. But that's interesting. He's wanting to be this criminal.
Yeah. But then again, maybe it was more complicated than that. Maybe the newspaper is kind of cherry picking the story they want to tell.
Absolutely. There's a narrative they're trying to sell here.
Exactly, yeah. There could be a narrative that they're trying to sell. Mind you, they also do that with Olsen a bit, and I still think Olsen comes across as a bit more sympathetic. Right, so what we know about Olsen, he was a Welsh miner who came down to the Kent coal mines when he couldn't get work in Wales, as many Welsh miners did during the Great Depression. Just as a random side note, when I was researching this story and came across this information, I had to go and check with Mum to look at my family tree to make sure I wasn't related to him.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which would have been fantastic for the podcast, just because it was quite a pattern at this point in history. You know, I think a lot of mines closed in Wales. I know the economic depression hit there as well. And so, you know, it was quite a big movement of people that these Welsh miners couldn't find work, and they came for the Kent coalfields. So I do have family who came down at the same time, which maybe is why I find it more easy to sympathise with Olsen. Maybe it's because I did this brief thing of putting myself into thinking, am I related to him? Is he family?
Are you related to him?
I am not.
Oh.
It would have been fantastic for the podcast if I was, but I'm not.
That would have been an amazing plot twist, and I would have absolutely changed narrative of this podcast. And being like, right, flipping the podcast on its head. What is Cat's family history now? But that's a cool thing to do in your research. Think, I'm involved in this. Am I researching my own family? What?
Exactly. That would have been an incredible way to suddenly discover I was researching my family. Like I was halfway into researching the podcast and writing the episode when I found out that he was a Welsh miner who'd come down at the same time. So we did check. We checked quite thoroughly along our family tree, and I'm not related to him.
Thank you, Cat's mum, for pointing this out. That's quite fun.
Absolutely.
Maybe you guys' families interacted.
That is true. They could have met. It's very possible they could have met. We never know.
We'll hold on to that. We'll believe that. I'm going to believe that at least. Yeah. So Olsen, he's come down to Kent. He can't get work in Wales. What else do we know about him?
Right. So he had a wife and kids that he was supporting, and claimed during his second trial, which again took place entirely based on evidence voluntarily confessed during the first trial. He claims during his second trial that he was trying to steal £20 to start a small business. Just to put that into context, that's about £915 in today's money. Which is always, it's always worth keeping that in mind for the amounts of money that get talked about here. And he planned to, quote, keep going until he was caught.
So he had an intent, he had a motive, an intention behind what he's doing, and it was to start a business to better himself and his family.
Exactly. It's more easy to look at him and think, oh, he'd experienced poverty and he was trying to provide for his family. You know, I think he comes across as very desperate.
That's very different from Webb, who is having different careers funded for him and choose to be a criminal,
and chose to be a cat burglar,
and chose to be a cat burglar, exactly. And then Olsen is wanting to better his wife and his kids and his life,
absolutely,
and start his own business. So he wants to have a legitimate legal way of getting money. He just needs to illegally get the money to fund that first.
He just needs the startup.
All right.
Just a couple of other things to point out. The newspaper and the judge are very keen to point out all the non-criminal paths their lives could have taken. I'm not sure how much Olsen's unemployment benefit was in today's terms. I'm not sure if it was actually enough for him and his family to live on. He was getting some kind of, I don't think unemployment benefit is actually what it was called at the time, but he was getting some kind of government handout. You know, it might not have been enough for his entire family.
That makes sense that he would need money elsewhere.
Exactly, yeah. So I think we'll leave it up to the listeners to decide if they're sympathetic or not. Again, I personally think Olsen comes across as very desperate. Webb comes across as like comedically committed to being a cat burglar.
I feel like I've got to be an Olsen's side more. If I'm going to pick a side, I'll be an Olsen's. But it is very funny to me that Webb is choosing to be a criminal and a bad one, and choosing to be a cat burglar, and I kind of like that comedy side. So, but listeners, you gotta let us know what you think. Let us know through our social medias or our Discord server, because we want to know. Maybe we'll do a poll. Who do you side with most? Fascinating. Also interesting, you mentioned how the newspapers, they talked a lot about their lives, or who they were before crimes and that. This is again really, the newspapers again quite detailed reports of who these people are. It's kind of exactly what we do today, really. If you think about true crime, in pop culture, we love true crime. We got all these documentaries, all these movies, all these podcasts, and it's kind of like refreshing in a way to know that it was the same back in the olden days, in
Oh, yeah.
1934 at least. That's really cool to see that this fascination in true crime is a thing that's occurred throughout.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So the trial comes to an end. Webb and Olsen were both found guilty and had to face their sentencing trial. Ultimately, Webb was sentenced to 15 months imprisonment and Olsen was sentenced to 12. So Olsen obviously gets slightly fewer months than Webb there. So it's interesting to wonder why there's a difference. I think maybe the judge also feels that one was more sympathetic than the other. We both think Olsen comes across as a bit more sympathetic.
Yeah, I see that with his, as we know about his family, and if that was mentioned in the trial, then surely the judge would feel the same that we do.
Yeah, because he did make his own defence during the trial. You know, he said, I was trying to provide for my family. I know, obviously, it was kind of that they investigated that and said, well, what else could you have done? But maybe they ultimately felt more sympathetic for him.
The difference is interesting.
Absolutely.
They're still both 15 months and 12 months. It's a year and just over a year imprisonment for failed cat burglars, which is unfortunate. But I don't know. Do you feel your opinion here? Do you think it's a harsh punishment for them or not?
Oh, I think think it's probably fair because I mean he did break into a couple of people's houses.
Yeah.
I mean that's
true.
Yeah, it's not really okay, is it?
It's not okay. We can't. Although it will put in the sense of this is almost a bit comedic of how much they failed. They blew up a safe twice and still couldn't get it open. You're right. Imagine the damage as well. They're trying to blow up the safe. They must have left quite a scene behind them when they went.
Yeah, the business owner complained they trashed and messed up all the paperwork. That ended up being the main complaint that they had about the two burglars was that they'd messed up the office. Yeah.
Well, that even just seems unnecessary. What are you trashing up the paperwork for?
Well, it was to try and get the safe turned over so they could get like gunpowder. I think they used gunpowder to get the safe open.
Right. Okay. I love that making complaint. They made a mess out there. They came in here. I know they broke in and they tried to take my stuff, but look at the state of this office now.
Exactly. Yeah. There we have it. The story of Olsen and Webb. Terrible burglars or a successful scheme to get into jail? Let us know what you think in the comments.
Hello, Gio from the future here. Just popping in to say some more stuff post initial recording. Before we finish this episode, we thought it was important to hear the story from the words of those actually involved. And considering this episode came as a result of documents within our own archive, we thought it would be best to share some quotes from our very own crime documents. Plus, I wanted to be a nerd and let you all in on all the secrets about what happens behind the scenes at the museum. So prepare to hear me geeking out about that. But for now, we've picked apart this crime. Now let's hear it in the actual words from the actual crime documents that we as a museum hold in our collection store. As we know, Olsen and Webb were charged with the intent to commit felonies. They tried to burgle, but they never succeeded. We've highlighted the most bizarre and memorable moments from their trial, but now it's time to hear the events of the night told through the words of the convicted criminals themselves. We'll first look at the statement given by Webb to the police on the 4th of April 1934. When explaining how the crime began, Webb stated, "I heard someone had been looking for me. I met a man whom I know as Olsen. He asked to speak to me and then asked me if I could blow up a safe. I told him I would have a try at it." According to Webb, he had met up with Olsen in a coffee shop, and Olsen explained that he had already attempted to blow up the safe himself, but called for Webb for his help. Webb tells police that they arrived at Pearson's Dormong's offices, the scene of the crime, at about 9 p.m. And after getting into the building, Webb stated that he checked the safe that Olsen had previously attempted to blow up, and saw, quote, "The safe was full of books and papers. I said to him being Olsen, 'That's no good. If there's any money here, it will be in the biggest safe in the other room. Let's have a look around, we might find the key.'" This is all in the confession he's telling to the police, just remember. After getting into another office in the building, Webb went into detail on how they tried to blow up a safe 2 times and failed. So here is his full account. I could not open the safe, and I suggested that perhaps the keys of the big safe were in the little safe in the other office. Together we tipped the safe over on the table and cut the cartridges open to get to the powder and poured the powder into the keyhole of the safe. When we had filled the hole and bunged it up, I laid a trail of powder to the safe and fixed it with a match. Olsen edged off out the door when I fired it. There was an explosion, a very mild one, hardly enough to blow my hat off, and it did not damage the safe. We had a second go, but the result was the same. Webb admits to him and Olsen then leaving Pearson Dorman's Long's offices, where they had failed to steal anything, and moving on to attempt to commit burglary in 2 more places that same night. I think it's best at this point to just pass it over to Webb to narrate how unsuccessful this whole night was. We left it and went out to some sheds nearby. Olsen got a screwdriver which I took with me and forced the padlocks off 2 or 3 of the sheds. We had a look around, but as there was nothing valuable, we came out. We then went down the road to the economic laundry and Olsen suggested we should get in there. We went up to the door and Olsen pulled the door handle and rattled it until we both dropped and he opened the door and we went in and had a look around. I never saw anything in there. We were not in there long and we walked away, leaving the door open. We walked along together until we go to the Sportsman public house at Cliff's End and I left him there. I went home across the cliff top. It would be about 1 a.m. then. Olsen sat down in the corner of the road and that's where I left him. I went home and have not seen Olsen since. Interestingly, when questioned by the police after the Webb, Olsen simply states, I have been served of a statement made by Thomas Joseph Webb to Detective Sergeant Simmel on the 4/4/1934, and I have read it and the statements made therein are right. I plead guilty to the charge. So Olsen just confirms and pleads guilty to the offence told by Webb. In this statement, this is where he then immediately confesses to those 3 other crimes that we told you about earlier, these unrelated crimes to this night. In his words, Olsen states, I also plead guilty to breaking into a house at Cliff's a few weeks ago and stole some cigarettes. I also got into a house at Broadstairs this morning and busted the gas meter. Webb and I also did the chocolate machine at Cliff's on Sunday night. So this is what Kat and I were talking to you about, this bizarre confession of his crimes. But as we discussed, we think we have an understanding to why he may have confessed to these at the time. It's so interesting to have this evidence. In our archive, in our collection store, we have a series of the exhibits or evidence exhibits that were used during the trial of Olsen and Webb. We have the witness statements for everyone involved during the trial, everyone questioned by the police or by the court. And we have documents that detail the charges and what happened once Olsen and Webb were in prison themselves. We have such a huge range of documents that we store and we preserve within our museum, behind the scenes of this museum. And that's why we wanted to have this moment here to explain to you just what we have and why we think this episode is really important. So, some of our episodes come from questions asked from our visitors, and others come from documents that we find in our collection store. As I said, this episode arrived from these collection store documents. One of our volunteers discovered this story whilst going through the crime documents in our inventory and having a laugh with the other volunteers in the room about the multiple failed attempts and doing the chocolate machine in. That quote, doing a chocolate machine in, stuck with our collection store volunteers. So when it came to coming up with ideas for what to write for our proposed Loaves to Legends podcast, back before it was just simply an idea of what this museum could do, a volunteer suggested the case of Olsen and Webb. Kat picked up this episode from our list of potential topics, and here you go. You've had this episode. This is how this one came about. We said at the very beginning of this show's existence that we wanted to share with you, listeners, the public, all the history that we have stored away in our collection store. All the incredible stories and tales that we don't just have the room to display within our physical museum. This episode has been the perfect example of how we are doing that. Personally, I am biased because episodes based on documents and objects within our collection store are definitely my favourite episodes. There's also something else that I wanted to share with you amazing listeners. We're now approaching the end of our first season of the Loaves to Legends podcast. I know. Tragic times. Don't worry, it's not for a few weeks yet. And plus, we're going to be too excited, I can really predict, we'll be too excited to wait for a whole next season before talking to you guys again. So expect maybe some potential special episodes popping up every now and then on your feed. But as we do approach the end of season 1 at the very least, we thought it would be important to maybe go into more detail about what actually happens behind the scenes as a museum volunteer. This episode, which relies on our collection store and the organisation of thousands of documents and objects that we look after, is a perfect chance to explain just how vital and important the work that our collection volunteers carry out each week. Our collection volunteers are currently going through our entire inventory of documents, objects, paintings and postcards and the like. I discussed with the museum manager, Millie, and fellow Loaves and Legends executive producer and editor, Millie that is, and I asked her why going through an entire inventory is so important. When asking her this, Millie expressed that as an accredited museum, and I'll explain that more in a moment, as an accredited museum, you work against a national standard. It's a set of rules that means that you are legitimate, people can trust you, you're professional. One of the things that they give us guidance for is how we manage our collection. The objects are very important, of course, but it's also the information that we have about those objects that is just as critically important. This could be who donated the object, is it on loan, if so how long for, who's it from, what condition the object was in, where the object has been moved in its history or what we know of its existence. It is so important, and when I started volunteering at Sandwich Guildhall Museum, I started as a collection volunteer, so I know how this works. Museum manager Millie trained me up on this, and it is fascinating. I think it's so interesting the amount of information we can have from just one document or just one object, and the procedures that rightfully we have to follow to make sure this information is correct. We started from the very beginning. So this project the collection volunteers are doing is they input everything that we have in our collection from the get-go. This has been going on for a few years now. And at the moment, at the time of recording, we have just hit 15,000 entries, which is an insane amount. We've still got a few more years going left of this project. It's through this huge work that they're doing that they're coming across documents like the Olsen and Webb trial, which we can then share in this podcast format. A further question that I asked our very own museum manager Millie is about accreditation. I wanted to ask her, well, what does that mean? What is an accredited museum? And why must we be aware of what this is when we are talking about our inventory? So, it's good for a museum's reputation, and it demonstrates that we are following the standards and that we're doing things in a way that is considered professional, as we should be. It holds us accountable for the collections that we care for. It gives the public more trust, I would say, for us as a museum. In addition to this, it's also helpful for access to external funding. So at Sandwich Guildhall Museum, we rely on mainly donations from youth visitors that come along. So if we want to maybe do an extra big project, we often will rely on external funding from the organisations. And it's having this accreditation to our museum allows us to have more of a chance of getting this external funding. We are doing more things behind the scene that the public wouldn't be aware of, that I certainly wasn't aware of until I came here. For now though, we should probably get back to the main episode, and we'll let past me, past Gia and past Kat end this episode for our ever important question of the week.
Thank you so much, Kat. That was absolutely amazing. I've loved getting to know the feelings of Webb and Olsen. I feel like, as mentioned, someone needs to create either a true crime documentary or a comedy show. Maybe a comedy show. Both. A true crime documentary that is a comedy show.
Yes.
The Adventures of the Cat Burglars Who Never Actually Steal Anything. What about that?
I think that's a good idea.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kat. To end our episode, as always, it's time for Question of the Week. At the end of every episode, I ask our guests to ask one question to you listeners at home. If you want to answer and chat with others, then click the link in the description for our Discord server. Now, Kat, having done the research for today's episode, you're the best person to ask for this. So, here's the final, most important moment. Do you have a question of the week for us, Kat?
I'm gonna get the listeners to try and think about the main question that we've thought about while doing this podcast. I'm going to go with, why do you think they voluntarily confessed all the crimes?
Oh, yeah. I want more theories. It's a good idea.
Yeah, but do you think one of my theories is any is any good, or do you have your own theory about it?
Or if you guys get into the Discord server and discuss this, I'll be joining you guys because I want to delve in deep to what you guys think, because that's interesting.
Absolutely. It's a really interesting question.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you so much there, Kat.
Thank you very much for having me.
We just wanted to give a quick reminder to email us any feedback, comments, or interesting facts that you know or discover in relation to the topics discussed in today's episode. Just email us at loaves2legends@gmail.com or join our Discord server and be a part of our online Loaves to Legends community. The email and Discord link will be in the episode description, as well as on our website, sandwichguildhallmuseum.co.uk. With every episode, we'll be asking a question of the week on our Discord server. This week's question is, why do you think Olsen and Webb voluntarily confessed to all the crimes? Join our Discord and have a discussion with us and other listeners. But for now, goodbye from us, Gia and Kat. We have been Loaves to Legends, the history-based podcast from Sandwich Guildhall Museum. Thank you for listening, and we'll speak again soon. Loaves to Legends is produced by Sandwich Guildhall Museum. Millie and Gia are the executive producers. Today's episode was researched and written by Kat and edited by Millie. Gia and Kat were your hosts today. Special thanks to Ian Pittaway for permission to use his translation of the music, and to Kat Batchelor for performing it. Finally, thank you to Beth Stone for the episode artwork.